This week on Conflict Zone, I'm in Istanbul to talk to Ravza Kavakci Kan, vice chair of Turkey's ruling party, the AKP. She speaks for her party on human rights, sits in the parliament, and is also a close confidant of President Erdogan. As the government pursues military operations in Syria and continues to crack down on civil liberties, where are Turkey's principles? Dr. Ravza Kavakci Kan, welcome to Conflict Zone. In a talk in front of your party members, shortly after the beginning of the attack in Syria, President Erdogan said, quote, "If the terrorists in Afrin don't surrender, we will tear them down." What does tearing down mean? How far will Turkey go?
Well, as you know, this process is not a new process. It started in 2011 with people being massacred in Syria, and Turkey has been under attack over the last year. 700 attacks have come to Turkish soil.
But it's the first time that you are intervening in Syria.
Actually, no, this is not the first time. It was during Operation Euphrates Shield in 2016 when Turkey went first through the Syrian border, and Turkey was the one who cleared the area from Daesh terrorists, ISIS, and Syrian citizens were able to go back in.
What does it mean, tearing down? What does this mean? It's a very aggressive metaphor.
What should we do with terrorists? We're fighting. Turkey is fighting.
You will fight in the whole world now, terrorists? You will enter into other countries, you will cross borders. This is not Turkey we are talking about.
No, Turkey is not.
Imagine Syria would have done the same.
Well, then let me take it to the beginning and start from the beginning. Turkish citizens are under attack, have been attacked by missiles, by bombs, coming from Syrian border. 700 different attacks took place. In addition to that, thousands and thousands of Syrians have been massacred since 2015. 6.5 million people have lost their homes. We're hosting 3 million of them in Turkey, so we know. So we're not there in Syria to kill citizens, innocent citizens, but we are there. We're there to fight terrorists.
You are responsible for human rights. That means you are responsible for international principles and values. Turkey invaded a foreign state without permission. You crossed borders without legitimation. Turkey is violating international law.
According to United Nations Charter, Article 51. A country has a right to defend itself, especially when
with Syria.
Let me correct this. Turkey has not invaded Syria.
What else? You were there and you are there with soldiers, with heavy arms.
What should we do? Please, then tell me.
What other countries would have done and will do? You violated international law.
No. Just like
what is your legitimation? So what is your international legitimation for crossing borders into another country, a sovereign country?
I was in Reyhanlı last week. No, actually, it was 3 days ago. Fatma is a 17-year-old girl, young girl, who was going to high school. And she got killed by a missile attack that was started by the YPG forces on the other side of our border. What would you suggest if your country was under attack and if your historical mosque got attacked when people were praying? We have lost 50 citizens, innocent civilians, over the last couple of days. So when your country is attacked from the border by terrorist organizations, tearing down.
I will tell you
What should we do about Daesh?
Interesting. I will give you an answer.
If Daesh is the same as
But
YPG, which is
I will try
for
to give you an
us.
answer what your country is doing when the same thing happens that you are just doing. When a Russian plane invaded your airspace 2 years ago, how did you react? You were very quick to shoot it down because you said, this is our country, you are invading us. You are doing the same thing now in Syria. Assad didn't allow you or invited you to come into Syria.
And Assad, I mean, we're talking about a leader who has killed almost 500,000 innocent civilians. I'm just wondering, I'm just curious about how come the international community was so quiet when people, women and children were being raped and slaughtered in Idlib and in Halep.
So please explain me what
I will
we here in
explain
Turkey?
it. We are doing what we did during Operation Euphrates Field in 2016. Just like we cleared the area,
You cleared. What a
cleared
word.
the
You
area
cleared.
from Daesh militants, terrorists. Right now, we're trying to get rid of the threat, the immediate threat that's affecting Turkish lives as well as innocent Syrian citizens'
But
lives.
with this argument,
and I'm talking about Kurdish
and
citizens.
I'm very
mostly.
curious about your answer. With this argument, from now on, every country can attack another country and can argue as you are arguing, because terrorist is a very international issue today. But let's talk about...
In the counter-argument, then your country gets attacked and you just sit and wait for them to kill more of your people. Is that the argument we should be fighting for?
But I think that countries, and Turkey especially, is more civilized than terrorist groups are. And that you are still a member of the UN, and that you are still respecting international law.
How
or aren't you anymore?
about other countries that have taken steps to protect their citizens? Let me open it very clearly. We are not at war. This is not something we wanted. We didn't
But
want
you are
to.
at war.
We didn't want to be the ones
But
who
you are
have
at
to
war.
host.
You opened a new war front in Syria.
3 million, I'm sorry, 3 million refugees,
You opened
which we
a war
are,
front.
whom we have not opened a war front. Come on, I'm sorry.
You
I'm
are
sorry.
with your army.
What do
you
you
are with
suggest?
your soldier in a foreign country. What is it if not a war front?
We are fighting Daesh terrorists.
What is it if not a
and-
war to invade another country?
Okay,
You crossed about...
I am sorry. I'm sorry. Calling it an invasion is nonsense. Every human being has a right to defend themselves, just like every nation, every state has a right to defend itself. So Turkey is there not because we're interested in going into Syrian territory. We do respect territorial integrity of Syria. But when innocent civilians are being killed in Syria, and when this spreads over to our border and kills our citizens, then nobody should expect us to keep quiet about
But your
this.
action is also killing civilians
No.
in Syria. No, everybody who is killed till now are terrorists. The international press, the UN, everybody is telling us that civilians died because the Turkish army is in Syria.
I have
Propaganda,
my facts.
right?
I have my facts, and I tell you
Ultimate
what I
facts?
know. Turkish military is taking utmost care to make sure not a single civilian
So it's the
loses
first army
their
in the
lives.
world who is capable of doing that. But Turkey has not even been able to convince any of the allies that the YPG are terrorists. The EU and the US have essentially dismissed your claims.
That is something, I'm a member of the Turkey-United States Parliamentary Friendship Group. And that's something we try to convey to our friends in Europe as well as the United States. PKK and YPG are the same. And as a matter of fact, Germany last year in March made a decision that makes carrying YPG signs illegal. And when you have a terrorist organization, PKK, and YPG has the same leader, Abdullah Öcalan, same ideology, exact same uniforms, and it is a terrorist organization. They are killing Kurdish citizens who live in Syria, just like PKK is killing Kurdish and Turkish citizens in Turkey.
The US was working and was acting with YPG in Syria, fighting against ISIS. They are allies of the Americans. Are you fighting against the Americans?
Unfortunately, that's something we have, to say the least, a very strong difference in opinion with the United States. Utilizing one terrorist organization as your boots on the ground just because they fight ISIS, Daesh, is not acceptable. We experienced this before with Al-Qaeda. We experienced this before with Taliban. Then they turn into monsters.
But your foreign minister was more clear than you are now. He said the ongoing US military support to YPG poisons our long-standing partnership. They want to continue with them. So the Americans are poisoning the relationship to Turkey if they continue to work with them?
Definitely not putting anything, making our relations better. It's definitely a strain, to say the least. Let me say this. YPG, PYD, whom United States uses as their boots on the ground, is no different from Daesh, ISIS, and they were the ones, according to BBC footage, who YPG set Daesh terrorists free in Raqqa. So I don't believe in any of these terrorist organizations.
With due respect, the American Lieutenant General Kenneth McKenzie, a very important man, said Turkey's operation into Afrin was not helpful and was instead taking focus away from fighting the Islamic State, which is in the interest of the Americans. That's a strong accusation.
Turkey has taken into custody, I'm trying to remember the numbers, 10,000 people, deported 6,000 people because of their Daesh ties.
But we're speaking from the American perspective.
For instance,
what are you answering the Americans?
The Brussels attack, the terrorist attack could have been prevented if they listened to Turkey.
What are you answering the Americans? Presenting his plans for Afrin, President Erdogan said, quote, "First we will wipe out the terrorists and then make the place livable." For whom? For 3.5 million Syrians who are our guests. Do you agree?
We did it in Jarablus. I've seen it. In September, I was in Jarablus. The people who had fled to Turkey for their lives and were living in the camps moved back to Jarablus. Now Jarablus is a livable city. Turkey is giving support when they need it. They have their own police. And it's a wonderful place where Syrians who are fleeing from YPG and Daesh terrorist attacks can take refuge.
It's an interesting plan,
so
indeed,
we did it already.
But did you ask President Assad if he agrees with your plans in his country, or are you now the leader in Syria?
Again, we're talking about the fact that almost 500,000 people have died.
No, we are talking about another fact. Your president said, for 3.5 million Syrians who are our guests, we will place them back to Syria in this area. Only I want to understand, who is giving you the legitimation to decide who is living where in Syria? This is my question.
Okay. All the Syrian guests, believe me, I go to the camps that are within Turkish border, outside of the Turkish border. I talk to the people. They want to go back home.
Erdogan said your next goal will be Manbij, which has around 2,000 soldiers, American soldiers. Will you launch an attack on American forces? They are there.
That's not something we want to see happen.
But they are there.
We don't... Look, let me also say this. We're also protecting NATO borders. We are protecting our NATO borders. So I think the question we need to ask is, why is a NATO ally utilizing a terrorist organization. They don't call it terrorist because they fight another terrorist organization, which ends up killing members, NATO member countries, citizens as well.
You are in charge of human rights for your party. Let's talk about them. President Erdogan said 2 days after the operation started, those who make the mistake and take the public squares will pay a heavy price. We will crush those who oppose us in this national struggle. Crush your own population?
What he meant, what this statement means is there's no toleration for supports for terrorism.
Crush your own population? According to the Turkish government, more than 300 people have already been detained for criticizing the operation on social media. There is no place for dissenting voices in Erdogan's Turkey?
Of course not. That's not the case. You know that's not the case. But supporting terrorism is not acceptable anywhere in the world. I know that's the case in the United States. It was the case right after September 11th attacks, which I know because I was there during those days. So that is not acceptable anywhere. It's not acceptable in Germany. It's not acceptable in France.
Is it possible that we are also talking about several measures how to fight against terrorism, and that there are some Turkish people who are saying the way how this government is doing is wrong? That's not automatically a support for terrorism. Or isn't it like that here?
With this operation, for the first time in a long time, I guess we lived this period during the coup attempt, but it's very difficult for Turkish leading party, AK Party, and Republican Party, CHP, to agree on it. But our main opposition, who doesn't agree on most of our ideas, they support this operation. The Jewish community in Turkey supports this operation. The Christian community in Turkey supports this operation.
For example, the Turkish Medical Association,
yes.
the Turkish Medical Association, with more than 83,000 members, representing around 80% of surgeons in Turkey, criticized the intervention, saying no to war, peace now. President Erdogan answered by calling them terrorist lovers. 83,000 surgeons, all terrorist lovers.
83,000 surgeons who said nothing while people were being massacred in Syria. I don't find that. I mean, that I respect their opinion, but I don't find that. I don't find that.
The police came only because surgeons said, this was the quote, no to war, peace now. That's a reason to call your own people terrorist lovers?
When they are doing this to support and expressing their support for YPG, which is a terrorist organization,
they didn't express the support of YPG.
Case.
They only mentioned no to war. There are perhaps other ways how to solve a conflict.
Okay,
they are terrorist lovers?
When you make a statement or when we criticize, of course, everybody should be open to criticism. That's what I believe in. Then you also need to produce an alternative. What's the alternative when you have 3 million people who you are hosting because they fled for their lives?
These people? You are persecuting these people.
Where in the world is support for terrorism acceptable?
So you still say that somebody who is questioning that war
No, I'm not saying that.
But that's what happened.
I'm saying all over the world. We have examples of this in the United States and the European.
Is a terrorist or a potential terrorist? Is this the story you're telling us?
No, that's not the case.
83,000 surgeons are now terrorist lovers only because they don't accept the strategy of the government?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying I don't agree with them.
In December, Erdogan gave a statement in honor of Human Rights Day where he praised Turkey for being one of the first countries that signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
It was at our program, maybe.
Yes. So let's talk about reality. At least 146 academics faced trial for signing a petition in January 16, demanding again an end to violence against Kurds in Turkey. Article 19 of the Declaration of Civil Rights states that everyone has the right to the freedom of expression.
That's
what
right.
was their crime? Why are they in jail?
People who argue that there's mistreatment of Kurdish citizens in Turkey, systematic mistreatment of Kurdish citizens in Turkey, are out of touch with reality.
And that's a reason to put them in prison. The petition says.
As the vice chair of AK Party in human rights, in charge of human
Yes.
rights, I'll tell you this. I'm a living example of how human rights has excelled during the time of AK Party. Living example. A woman like me would not be able to get elected and serve in the parliament. When I say like me, I'm saying a woman who chooses to wear
So
the
on
headscarf.
one side it's getting
Same
better.
thing for the Kurdish
On
citizens.
one side it's
No,
getting
that is
better.
not
The petition
case.
says, and at the other side, we demand the government to prepare the conditions for negotiations to create a roadmap that would lead to a lasting peace. Is demanding peace a terrorist act in Turkey?
When this petition incident, let me talk about that time. In 2015, when President Erdogan took a very, very important step and started a peace process in Turkey. PKK, I'm old enough to remember how it emerged. And I remember as a child, okay, I don't want to admit it, but I'm 46 now. But as a child, I remember hearing on the news how PKK, a terrorist organization, was killing people. So in 2015, we took a great step, important step, to start a peace procce. PKK dropped its weapons,
We know
then
about
started
that.
the
My
attacks.
was another one.
Yeah.
We know the
Yeah.
history, but we are talking about something else. For example, the Committee to Protect Journalists currently lists over 70 imprisoned in Turkey. One of them being Deniz Yücel, the German journalist.
Yeah,
He
I
was
know the
arrested
case.
in February 17, 1 year ago. Why?
Are journalists above the law? A person may be an academic, maybe a doctor, maybe a lawyer, maybe a janitor. Are they above the law? The people, the numbers that you have mentioned, they
Why
may
is
happen
Deniz
to be
Yücel 1
they
year
may
in
happen
a
to be
prison
journalists.
without prosecutors, without a case, without a court, nothing? This is representing human rights, international standards. 1 year.
Turkey is a country where the rule of law applies.
1 year, no
prosecution,
prosecutor, no accusation,
the prosecutors
no court.
have their cases. That's something for the courts to
You
decide.
are representing human rights.
Yeah.
There is one person and a lot more. 1 year in a Turkish prison. Please explain me. How is it possible on one side that you are pleading for human rights and somebody is in prison 1 year and nobody knows why?
No.
There's not an official accusation.
There is evidence against him. That's why he's
not an
in prison.
accusation.
I understand this argument, trying to present the reality in a different way, but
Is there an accusation? Reality. Is there an accusation, yes or no?
Nobody would be held in any prison without an accusation.
Is there an official accusation like the principles and the standards of international human rights and law? Yes or no? The guy is now 1 year in prison. Yes or no?
I'm saying nobody is about the law, so the courts will decide. I don't have the details of his case.
Turkey means that internationally, 1 year in prison without accusation.
No, that's not the case. No,
it
that's
is the
not
case.
the case.
No accusation.
He has a file, and the courts will decide what's going on.
There is not an accusation. A court can't decide. Human rights?
Yeah, human rights.
One person knows what Mr. Yücel did. This is your president, and he declared openly that he is a terrorist. This is also interesting. No court, no accusation, but a politician who decided that he is guilty. Human rights? This is the way how today the law is living in Turkey, not the courts, but the president. Politics are deciding who is responsible?
Of course it's not. It's the courts who decide who is right, who is a criminal, and who needs to serve time in jail. That's not something that politicians decide. But naturally, in every country, the prime ministers, the presidents, and ministers tend to have more intelligence than ordinary citizens do. So.
Oh. Thank you very much, Ravza Kavakci Kan. Thank you for being on Conflict Zone.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure. Thank you.